Welcome you all back to the Human Role episode 2 of season 2. As I mentioned last episode, I had a really special guest for this one as we talk about global payroll. So Mariah Hantis, who is the Senior Director of Rewards, Payments, and People Ops at Deel, is with us today to talk about all things global payroll. So Mariah, thank you so much for joining. I know you're new to my network. We've talked, of course, a couple of times that you're new to my network. So for people who aren't familiar with you and your background, if you don't mind maybe just giving, a brief description of your experience and really how you got, started in this industry.
Of course. Well, thank you first and foremost for having me on. I'm so excited to chat today. So my payroll career goes back a little over 10 years now, starting out in the education industry. So doing union payroll, all the fun things, as hard as payroll can get, I think. That was, local payroll, one state, but had the complexities of union pay, and did that for about 4 years. And then I moved into the tech space working for a B2B marketing firm, which expanded my role globally, right? So overseeing payroll and total rewards, as well as in the US and in countries like the UK, Ireland, and Singapore. And that grew to about 200 employees at the time. And then I moved over to Deel, which has given me the most experience as far as now operating from 3,000 plus roles and team members in the organization across 100 different countries. I think we're up to like 102 currently. We're all over the world and overseeing things like payroll, payment operations, people operations, benefits, perks, compensation, and mobility. So it's quite a large umbrella at Deel.
Yeah, so it sounds like it. So I think we'll just take maybe a brief moment to talk about Deel for anyone who's not versed, in the global HR platform. I mean, I think it's, still considered a startup, been around for 4 or 5, going on 5 years now, it seems. And it's come across Forbes, a couple of times, but I think last year I saw a couple of stats where it ranked number 38 on the Cloud 100 list and like number 81 in America's Best Startup Employers, which is, great. And I think the last stats I did see where you guys have 15,000 clients across 100 countries. Recently, I think the last article said that you guys are valued at $12 billion, which is just amazing, right? Which leads me into even this year, I've been seeing some posts where for 2024, Deel is projected to have open up at least 1,000, plus roles for this year, which is great and a massive growth, right, in this economy, especially too. So for people who aren't like fully versed, at least on like Deel and, the whole platform in general, I don't know if you can, confirm some things or just maybe get into some more details on what specifically, is really provided with the platform.
Of course, I'd love to. So yeah, 2024 is going to be a big year for us. We are growing exponentially and have been steadily across, I've been with Deel 2 years now. We've been having steady growth across those 2 years, and 2024 will be no shortage of that. But to summarize what we do as a whole, Deel in general is an all-in-one HR platform for global teams specifically. So it helps simplify every aspect of managing international workforce. So from culture to onboarding to local payroll compliance, Deel works with independent contractors and full-time employees across 150 different countries compliantly. So I know we'll probably talk more about, the different things you can do from the payroll and HR space when it comes to compliance and global expansion and all those things. But Deel is right up there with other companies in the market who are doing those things and basically enabling companies to go global and to step in that world depending on which avenue you're taking and how you plan to do that as a business. We have solutions across multiple verticals to help you get there.
Amazing. Thank you so much for giving us that background. Especially, I know that lots of people across my timeline, especially on LinkedIn, are definitely looking for roles, and I have a large network that cover a broad scope of things. So we'll make sure to kind of get, the word out, and anyone can go and check out, the site, and really excited to see, how your platform even expands even more into 2020.
Visionary voices, bold breakthroughs. This is Shally's Alley, where top recruiting minds spill their best-kept secrets live every Friday at 1 p.m. Eastern. Raw, unfiltered conversations on sourcing, hiring, and the future of talent, where we ask the tough questions no one else will. Tune in and level up.
But now, getting into like the nitty gritty of, the massive global payroll world. From my end, I haven't had much experience with, just a little bit, but I know from your end, of course, you've had a lot of experience. And I know that you're starting in union, I think was probably, a good way to start to segue into global. So what would you say, like in your opinion, for companies who are looking to expand, right, and go into the global world, what would be maybe like your top strategies or things that they should really like consider before, taking the leap and going global?
There's so many options, right? So first, as a company, you need to evaluate how you want to expand, right? Expanding there's not just one way to do it. There's not a right way or a wrong way. What there are more compliant ways, more cost-effective ways. And really that comes down to an analysis, right, that the business would do to understand, right, how many people are you trying to employ in another country? How much experience do you have employing in another country, and what resources will you use to enable that? That's what I recommend first and foremost, because you can go down a route, right, where a company is going to start in Spain, right? Set up a new company in Spain. They've never started a business in Spain before, and they want to start a new company and employ 2 people there because they have 2 people that can be Spain full-time employees, and that's what they want to do. That's a solution. That's a way to get there. That's a way to expand, but that might not be for the size that you're looking to employ, the worker type that you're trying to employ, or your familiarity or knowledge in Spain and the resources you have to get on board as far as accountants and lawyers to be compliant in employing in Spain. It might not be worth it, right? So you want to just look at all of those different scenarios, because sometimes, if you're wanting to employ 2 people in another country, it might not make sense at the size and time that you're looking to do it, to do the set up an entity, go through all of the hoops and to get there, because it's quite an extensive and quite cumbersome process. And it's key to make sure that you're doing it right, because at the end of the day, when you do your payroll and your tax filings and your reporting, that's when you really want to make sure that you know what you're doing and you know what you're getting into. So alternatively, there's EOR structures, right? Employer of record, where maybe you're employing 1 or 2 people in another country. It can be more than that, right? But we're just saying we're getting our feet wet, right? A new company is looking to expand in a new country. Maybe you want to dabble in the world of employer of record, right? Look into what that can do for you, because essentially then you take the burden of compliance off your plate. If you're not familiar with a new country and their local regulations and the statutory compliance and the reportings, you leave that to someone else that can do that for you, and set up an employer of record business where it's a co-employment type relationship, and you can have that done more cost-effective, in a more cost-effective way, as well as ensuring that all of that compliance off the bat is taken care of, right? And then you get your feet wet and you take learnings away, because you stay close with the business that you're choosing to do your EOR services with. So you stay close to all of the requirements and all of the needs. So then you understand, maybe in a year from now or in 2 years from now, I want to set up my own entity. I feel like I can do this. You gain that confidence, right? So depending on which way you want to go, I think that's a first step, because there's, again, not a right solution, right or wrong way. And then second, you want to make sure that you have a system or a platform that can accommodate the global employment, right? If you are strictly in the US and you're using a US-based HR platform, and you start hiring employees in Spain and United Kingdom and all of the different countries around the world, we have to start thinking, what platform can accommodate that global workforce? How does that workforce management look like? How does onboarding look like? Are you gathering the correct compliance documents? What you do, there's no I-9 in Spain and there's no W-4 in the United Kingdom, right? There's equivalents that do similar things, but they're not called the same things. They're not, there's different forms that are collected for different reasons. And you want to make sure that you understand that as a business. And usually you leverage HR payroll platforms that can accommodate global workforce to understand what those are. That would be the next step, right? Even just down to wording, right? A social security number is not always called a social security number, right? It's different numbers and different phrases across different countries. So you want to make sure that the platform you're using is accommodating to all of the different countries and the terminologies that they use globally.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for that detailed explanation. I think, especially when, I've dealt with employees that are on visas, right? Those are definitely different. And you have to make sure you're in compliance with that. So I'm sure it works the same way from, expanding global. Would you say, I guess in like your experience too, is it kind of like a preference to maybe hire someone that lives in that same country, or have you had, good experiences with someone who may not live in that country, but, has processed before? Does it really depend on the candidate, or is there really maybe a heavier preference to get someone that has lived there before and would know kind of like the ins and outs versus someone that doesn't necessarily live in that country that you're expanding in?
So there's unicorns everywhere, right? So from a payroll and HR perspective, you can find and we see this at Deel all the time when we look to hire HR experts and payroll experts to do our client payroll, right? They're not always living in the same country that they're processing payroll in. So you can find someone who works from Belgium that knows Spain payroll. So there's unicorns everywhere, and businesses can leverage that talent around the world. What that would mean is having employees in Belgium and Spain. But aside from that, that's one avenue. I wasn't sure exactly in which way you were asking the question. So also to go on about hiring with different employees, it depends. So in the US, right, it's difficult from our perspective because anywhere outside of the US, you pretty much need some type of visa to work in the US. But when you look at countries like the EU, there's a lot of countries where as long as you're an EU resident, you can work in other countries. So an EU resident in France can work in Spain, with a few easy paperworks that go through. It's not as complicated as trying to apply for an H-1B or something of that sort. So it really depends on the country and the region that you're hiring in to understand if it would be more complicated to hire someone in the same country or outside of the country. In all cases, though, it's always easier and more seamless to just hire from within the country.
Yeah, I love your word, the unicorn. Anytime you find that unicorn, it's like, whoo, and then, you just got to make sure everything's good to go to bring them on. So you reminded me of that word the minute you said it. I was like, you know what? Yes, I've ran across a couple of those before. So
we're out there.
Yeah, totally. So look, let's get into, your specific role. So you're talking about close to 3,000 employees across 100 different countries. And I mean, you're the head there from the payroll and people ops stance, different time zones, right? So like from, anyone who also can relate, that's a heavy load. I can relate to it, but not to that extent, right? So how do you ensure that everyone feels really supported? Because that, of course, is key, right? From a management perspective. But then when you're talking about so many payrolls, just really making sure, you're crossing your T's, dotting your I's, and that nothing is getting missed, when it comes to payroll day.
For my team hiring, it has been strategic as far as ensuring that we're hiring people in multiple time zones to ensure that we can accommodate different service requests that come in across all of our team members globally in a reasonable time, right? We want to make sure that someone isn't waiting for the US to wake up to address something that might have happened in APAC. That's not to say we have team members internally all over the world, but they are staffed across the US time zone and EMEA time zone to have some overlap. And that's the first thing I think you can think of doing when you're staffing globally and having an internal team to be able to manage that. And then second, of course, right, it's communicating with our team. And we know this in payroll, right? It's things are moving fast with hiring, with resignations that are coming through and changes that happen and promos and all of this. And all we have to do It's just so simple, right? 100% accurate and on-time payroll. That's it. That's all we have to do every pay cycle. But it comes down to communication, making sure we have close relationships with our stakeholders that are helping us process payroll across all of the different countries globally, as well as close relationships with our HRBP team who are processing changes, throughout the course of the month or that quarter, to make sure we're capturing accurate salary, accurate pay for the team members. And then just making it known who we are and that we're here to support you, right? Like, this is the most that you can do as a payroll team to make sure that they know that they're a priority, to know that we're taking your request seriously and sensitively. We know payroll this is what's in their pocket. This is what they're using to go home and pay their bills and get food on their table, right? So we need to treat every request, and we do, with care and speed. One of our core values, genuine care and Deel speed.
Yeah, you nailed it. You definitely nailed it. Communication. And I always say, I've said in so many prior podcasts that people who don't do payroll think it's a click of a button, and it really is not. It's so granular. And there's like so many things that we deal with on a daily that you would never even guess. One little button could mess up like 3 other things, so you really have to be careful and really have to take your time, and that attention to detail is good. And you started it off correctly, right? Communication is like major key across, anything. So thank you for those explanations. And then I've given some funnies and some other, episodes where like, oopsie, I've been doing something and I might have, messed up something, just all in my learning curve, of course, like years and years ago. But what would you say has been like your biggest fire, right, from payroll day or week, not necessarily at, your current company, but just in general that you've like come across on those like hectic and frantic payroll weeks?
I have a great one from years ago. In my first encounter in payroll was a network outage. So a network outage coupled with a power outage and some things that were going on where we had to ultimately, we outsourced our payroll, but the network that we were using was not connecting due to all of the things going on with the outages at the time. And we had to calculate gross to net payroll by hand, like what they used to do before systems existed, right? So it's not a foreign concept, but it's foreign when all you've done was payroll in a platform that calculated it for you. It wasn't even like you were doing in-house payroll and you knew what to do, where to look. It's like, wait, no, I really did just press a button at the end of the day. And now I have to calculate gross to net. There's about 100 people. So calculating gross to nets for federal and state, luckily single state. So we didn't have too much complication. It was just very manual, very time consuming. And of course, there were true ups that had to go into the next cycles. But right, the goal was, how do we get people paid as close to their net pay as possible, as accurate as we can on payday. And then not only did we, since we could not go through our process, we couldn't issue the ACH file. The Nacha file came out of the system, so we couldn't get that. So what did we do? Every direct deposit form that we had, everything partly was on paper at the time then too. It was a mix between paper and electronic, and got their direct deposit form and did manual wires one by one to make sure their net pay was hit on payday.
I'm sweating just as you're talking about it.
A little PTSD talking about it, but fine.
Yeah, luckily you're at 100 and maybe not 1,000, but
right.
Yes, I think separately I've experienced it where the system I've been using has just been down on that day, or they've done an update over the weekend. And of course, Monday, it's kind of in shambles. And then it just messes up your payroll whole day because you always have a plan and, that Sunday night anticipation to that Monday. So that was a big one. So I know a lot of my payroll peeps and HR peeps out there will definitely feel your pain. But yeah, anyone looking to get into the industry, definitely know the sites that can help you calculate, or definitely I always say maybe just every blue moon, take some time to freshen up those calcs because you just never know when you'll need it. Well, no, great. And I think too, you've dealt with both US and now, international payrolls. Would you say it's really important to streamline both, or do you think it's still okay to use 2 separate systems? I know I've come across many companies that really, it is for the high C-suite executives, it's really important to have everything all in one. And I haven't quite like determined if that is really like best practice just because of the, differentiators between the two. Would you say it's really important, in, your opinion, to streamline both and have both together, or could it be perfectly fine to keep things separate?
It depends on a lot of factors, right? I think it's very important to have a single source of holistic data, right? So that all team members globally are in the same system and have the pay data in the same system so that you can extract reporting on which currencies they're being paid, what's their annual amount, just like typical HRIS data in a single platform globally for all team members in an organization. I think that that's key, right? Because that is critical to understand just workforce, right? And budget and all of that. But as far as when you get down to the next level of actually processing and executing the payroll, I think it can work in multiple ways because there's some, I don't know that we're there yet 100% to be able to do all of those things in every single country around the world, multiple platforms being able to, or multiple different companies being able to offer a service like that. From Deel's perspective, I can touch on a little bit of like, sure, we can have an EOR, right? We can have global payroll, we can have contractors, you can have HR profiles, and you can see all of that data holistically and run it from a single system. But then is the company, that the size of the company, a match for Deel currently? That's a question, right? Of like, if you are 50,000 people big, you might want to use something like a Workday, right? And then Workday at this time, right? We'll get there one day. When you're using a system like Workday, what connections can Workday do and provide to be able to process payroll in 100 different countries? Generally, they're leveraging outsourced programs that are going to be, by nature, they just have to be multiple different solutions to get to that end goal of processing payroll. But I think as far as executives and C-suites go, seeing that data holistically, where can you see the data holistically? And then the processing the data happens on the back end. That just might have to happen in multiple platforms, depending on which countries you're operating from and the type of payrolls that you have.
Yeah, I've come across that. It really is, I guess every company has to evaluate their own current situation, but no system is perfect and every system is doing what they can to accommodate, but it's just so hard because every company has their own niches, right? And so we've gotten through, the business aspect of things, but I do, have a lot of listeners and network group of people that really are looking to either get into like the payroll HR world, but then the ones that have been in domestically really trying to like get some heavier insight on going more global. And if they want to get into that, but don't have experience, how to kind of start planting those seeds. So what would be like your advice to someone, in this industry already, or someone thinking of getting into this industry, what they really would need or should really look for to really get that heavier experience and get their foot in the door?
For those who are looking to come into the payroll industry, just do it. No one wakes up when they're 18 and is like, you know what? I found out what I'm going to do. I'm going to go to college and I'm going to study payroll and I'm going to get a master's of payroll because it doesn't exist. No one dreams of that. You kind of fumble and you end up here. You find out one day you're good at it and it's, something that you hold on to and it carries you through the rest of your career. One day you wake up and you've been doing it for 40 years. I don't know. It just happens. In all seriousness, just take the jump. It's a great career. It is something that it goes unnoticed, right? A lot of people don't know who you are. They're like, who's payroll? Unless there's an error or something wrong, kind of like you get the best of both worlds. If you like to sit behind the scenes, you get to do all the important work, right? But sometimes, you don't have to show your face. And if that's not what you're into, and other times, then there are difficult conversations and situations that happen. It's all sensitive data, so that's expected. And then for those who have been in the industry, is just leverage your network, right? It's so important. It's one of those careers, like I said, you can feel isolated. like you're sitting here, everyone around the world and all of these companies have some payroll person to some degree doing payroll, whether they're just working with an external vendor and managing data or whether they're processing payroll in-house full cycle. So we all have some connection and understand at some level we're doing payroll for businesses, right? And we sit here kind of like, what do we do? How do we do it? We don't know who to go to, right? I think it's one of those professions where you really have to search to find your people. And I found a lot of people in my network through the Global Payroll org, local chapters. When I was studying for my CPP, I joined a random group in Denver to study for my CPP, right? And like I have connections in Denver. I'd go to the conferences and I'd meet people there. And payroll's so crazy because you can be two people doing payroll. One person is doing payroll for, let's say, electricity company that has, pension and all of these crazy things going on. And then you have a payroll person in a tech startup that is bare bones as far as like, there's no pension. There's just, it's salary payroll, maybe a few exempt, non-exempt, but nothing crazy, right? Or nothing like your tenure is a little bit shorter than people who've been working for the same company for 40 years. You have such diversity within the profession itself that there's like sometimes no two payroll professionals alike. So it's always good to collaborate and understand the different avenues that people are coming from, the different experience. What's one issue for you is not an issue for someone else. And maybe they can use their experience approaching other problems to help you. So I think that is key. Again, the goal in all payrolls to get those 12, 24, 26, 52, whatever cycle you have, 100% accurate, 100% on time, and what you leverage. Join your local groups, your local chapters. There's different organizations that I'm a part of that I can mention. I have Troop HR. That's a big one I leverage. It's mostly HR related. There's a lot of HR people there. At first, I feel like I was one of the only payroll people in there, and has since been so welcoming and has brought in a lot of the professions that have gone in there. So there's a lot of recruiters. There's a lot of payroll in addition to just HR, people ops and head of peoples and whatnot in that group. And it's great. It's a great resource because you can post something and everyone chimes in. And sometimes you have your head of people doing payroll, right? And like if they're a small startup, that's just what they own and they don't know, and so like they're leveraging these groups for information and resources. So definitely networks are huge.
Yeah, thank you so much for all that information. And you're right. It's just all of us have that story where we just stumbled across payroll, right? And so it's just one of those things where it's so funny. No matter who I ever talk to, that's the whole thing. It just it fell in your lap, and then here you are. But it really is, a really good career because to what you mentioned, some people do just like to be behind the desk. But if you're, more open and a more people person and all the groups that you mentioned you're involved in, then you can really get into the HR stuff. Or now it's the heavier people ops stuff. And, now you can get into really being very strategic. And I know for me, it even having people under me that just kind of came in as temps, but now are like payroll specialists or, generalists. And so it's really, really great to see. And look, the CPP is opening up now for the spring. So everyone just, get your groups. You need a group around you and make sure, you're studying because there's always that trick word in there that could trip you up. So, but Mariah, thank you so much again for joining us. This was a great conversation. Really, thankful to have like your insight on the global payroll side of things. And we'll make sure, if we can share your Deel link. I know there's lots of people in my network looking for roles this year. So please go to their site and check that out. And really anxious and excited to see what 2024 will bring for you all. So hopefully we can have maybe a follow-up episode in the future. But thank you so much for joining. This was great conversation, you guys. And for upcoming to my Human Role network, we're episode 3. I'm coming up in the next couple of weeks. Now that we're kind of slowing up on the year-end season, we will be talking about audits. The audit season will be coming. Make sure you're prepared. Make sure you know where to get the reports because they're not going to give you extensive heads up. So more to come on that one. But thank you so much, Mariah. We will keep in contact and hope to see you on a future episode.
Yes. Thank you, Tiana.